Hey, Alex Scott here, and welcome to Bass Jam Survival Guide. Jam sessions are the ultimate test of a bass player's musicality and creativity. The ability to adapt to a constantly changing musical environment is the key to surviving and thriving as an improviser. We need to be able to recognize keys and chord progressions quickly. We need command of scale shapes and leading tones, and of course, we need to be versatile across many genres, feels, and grooves. Now, I've organized this survival guide into a series of practical lessons and practice sessions. You'll train your ears to quickly recognize intervals, map out and chart chord changes to any song that might get called, gracefully lead the harmony from chord to chord, and lock in with the rest of the rhythm section. We'll then dive into 7 genre-specific applications to help build your groove vocabulary and get you ready for whatever the jam might throw your way. There's tab sync and notation, along with slow-mo controls, looping, and fretboard animations, all to help you learn at your own pace. So whenever you're ready, grab your bass and let's get started.
All right. Welcome, children of the fire, to another great one. Tonight we have a great teaching stream with the wonderful and amazingly talented Alex Scott. You know him from projects he's done with Jamplay. You know him from his projects he's done here with TrueFire, and you know him from Twitch. Just before we get started, though, I want anybody who is in the chat right now to go ahead and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, keep an eye on the chat because we're going to be dropping the links to Alex's course, Bass Jam Survival Guide, down in there. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them down in the chat, and Alex will be there to answer them for you. In the studio today, we have Jeff Sheets and Tommy, who's going to be running things. So without further ado, it's time to throw things over to the wonderful and talented Jeff Sheets. Jeff, how are you doing tonight?
I am good, Shane. How about yourself? How you doing, man?
I'm warm.
Well, you know, that's good. I can't say that for where I'm at. I don't have that luxury. It's warm here in the studio, but you don't want to step outside right now. But you know what? We're going to heat things up. I got a feeling because we have Alex with us tonight, who's not only an amazing bass player, an amazing musician in general, he's an amazing producer, does tons of production stuff, does music for video games. He's just a happening cat. So we could chat about him, but let's just bring him on and let's have a conversation. Let's bring on Alex Scott.
Well, hello there, everybody. How's it going, man?
It's good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing quite well. It's chilly here as well in New York, so we have that in common. It's been pouring rain outside all day, so
oh, good. That makes it fun.
But we're staying cozy here in the studio. So
yeah, you look cozy. You look like you're ready to do some serious rock in there. So man, we're going to talk about a couple things tonight, and yeah, if anyone has any questions, for sure chime in to Alex about bass. We could talk a little bit about production. Anyone who's followed any of TrueFire's song lessons, most of the jam tracks that you're listening to are things that were put together by Alex. So he's quite proficient at a lot of different skills. But this Bass Jam Survival Guide is, I think a super important course for bass players because it really does sort of open your eyes to a lot of different things. It's not just learn this one style or one lick or one thing. It really helps you be a more well-rounded musician for gigging, for going out there and doing it. Tell us a little bit about that as far as how you put this thing together, what you were thinking along those lines.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And first of all, thank you for all the kind words. I appreciate it. But no, this course was an absolute blast for me to put together because it's a direct representation of, I've been a touring and gigging bass player first and foremost for 15 years. And you learn a lot, obviously, in that time about a lot of different things, how to improvise, how to chart tunes, how to learn tunes really, really quickly. But this course was really my first opportunity out of all the stuff that I've done with Jamplay and then now with TrueFire to really distill all of that experience into like, what is the essence of being a kind of working bass player, a jamming bass player, working with other musicians, and being able to, react in real time to things, and like all those kinds of more, I guess you could say, ethereal skills or whatever. I don't know what the word is, but all that stuff that is beyond just like, oh, that's a G note, and when we play rock music, we do this. It goes beyond that into a lot of the core concepts of like, how do bass lines really function in a band? What is the bass player's role in the band? How can we do that in the context of jamming and improvising? So yeah, it was a ton of fun to put together, and I think it hopefully imparts a lot of that knowledge. So
Absolutely. I think it does. I think it's a great course. And as Shane said, you can find the link to the course in the chat underneath the video on YouTube in the description. We got people tuning in from Oregon and Salt Lake City and Las Vegas and parts unknown. So let's go ahead. What we wanted to do tonight, guys, was have Alex sort of give us a little bit of a lesson from the course, but also go a little deeper dive, and a little bit of a different way of thinking about some things that are covered in the course, but just some other details. So I'm going to get out of here, Alex, and let you just do a little bit of teaching for a few minutes. And once again, if you have questions along the way as he's going through this, we'll take a break in a little bit, and we'll do some Q&A. So
yeah. Absolutely. Sounds like a plan. No. And so that was, looking at what we wanted to do on the stream, I thought we can kind of speed run, I guess, if you want to, for any gamers out there, we can speed run a little bit. And I just want to go through some of the core concepts that we talk about in the first, really half of the course, because the way the course is structured is we start with some foundational concepts. Then we talk about what I call the 3 L's. Of really good improvisational bass playing, which is listening, leading, and laying it down. And then we take all of those more core foundational concepts and we apply them to real world styles of music. So we have a bunch of different great jam tracks that I put together in all kinds. We got a classic rock one, a modern rock one, funk, country, blues, all kinds of great stuff. So we take all those concepts and we apply those out over real world styles of music. And so I just want to kind of give you guys a taste of what is more in that first half of some of the concepts that we talk about. And then if this seems interesting to you guys, if it seems like something that you want to check out more of, definitely look at the links in chat and go and pick the course up, because I think it could be a great boon for your playing. But no, really, one of the most fundamental things that I talk about at the very beginning is, and it's a scary thing for a lot of new players, and I totally understand why it is, but I promise it's not going to hurt too bad. I start with a little bit of music theory, because I think, especially as a bass player, it's an incredibly important thing to know at least a little bit about. And it's really not as complicated as I think a lot of people are afraid music theory is. And the main way that I break it down, and one of the most fundamental skills, is the idea of intervals. This may not be news for a lot of players out there, especially if you're a little bit more experienced, but intervals are so useful in so many different contexts, and all they really are, it's the concept of thinking in terms of numbers instead of in terms of notes. So let's take our C major scale as a great example, right? C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, just our basic C scale. When we talk about intervals, we're talking about assigning numbers to each of those. 1 is our root, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and back up to our 1 or our octave, however you want to think of it. But it's just assigning numbers to each of those scale degrees, as we call them. This, you guys will see over the next couple of minutes as I talk more about it, how useful this is for so many different things. But that's the gist of the concept. Now, that's for a major scale. But what about a minor scale? Well, we can alter each of those scale degrees by flatting or sharping them. We primarily flat them. So for a minor scale, for instance, what if we wanted to play a C minor scale? 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 1, right? Because we're taking that E note and we're dropping it down a half step to get an E flat. So we say it has a flatted third in a minor scale. And then same with the 6th and the 7th note of the scale. A and B natural, we move those down and they become a flatted 6th and a flatted 7th. Even simpler example would be our dominant scale, right? That kind of funky bluesy scale we all love to use so much. That is simply a major scale, but with a flatted seventh scale degree. What about key of G? Let's move it around a little bit. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, right? That's our major scale. Same exact thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, right? Or G minor, that B flat or A sharp becomes a flat 3. E flat or D sharp becomes our flatted 6th. And then F natural would become our flat 7. An F sharp when it is just a 7th scale degree as part of the major scale, but then we drop it down just a half step to flat it, and becomes that F natural. That's a really, really core concept that we work with a ton in the course. Why? Okay, it's numbers. What's the big deal? It allows you to do so many cool things. The biggest advantage of thinking this way is that it allows you to play anything in any key at any time. So one of the things I talk about in the course is, and I've been in this situation more times than I can possibly count as a professional musician, is like being on stage or being at a jam session, wherever you may be, and having a guitar player or a keyboard player or a singer or whatever go, oh, hey, let's play Wagon Wheel. You go, okay, I think I know the chords to Wagon Wheel, but I want to do it in the key of E flat because I'm weird, or, because it's easier for me to sing over, or that's how I learned it. And you go, oh man, hang on a second. It's G, then D, then E minor. But if I'm playing it in E flat, oh man, what? You start transposing, you're thinking about all these notes. If you can just think in terms of intervals and assign each of the chords of a piece, or of each of the chords in a chord progression, one of those numbers. So for example, G, D, E minor, C, very common chord progression. We would say 1 is our G, right? D is that 5th scale degree. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we say it's the 5 chord. E, the note E, is our 6. It's the 6th note in the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then C would be our 4 chord, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So instead of thinking G, D, E minor, C, we just think 1, 5, 6, 4. This makes it really, really easy to transpose to different keys, play things in different keys. It also makes it really easy to explain song forms to other musicians really quickly. So you can just look at another player and go, oh, this tune's a 1, 5, 6, 4 in G. And if you've learned to think about intervals in this way, you're immediately going to understand exactly what that means. So that's really the kind of core essence of where we start in Bass Jam for Survival Guide is looking at those intervals. We do some ear training, which is just listening to, different intervals and learning to identify them. That's another really useful thing with intervals is if you get really used to thinking in this way, you can listen to what other musicians are playing and hear and understand what they're playing very quickly and very efficiently. We'll talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. But that's kind of where we start, right? We start with this idea of intervals. And then in the course, unfortunately, I don't have time to do it on stream tonight, but I go into a whole charting system that I've developed over many years as a working professional bass player, where I'm able to write down a song, like a whole song form, in a way that is very, very quick, takes half of a sheet of paper, and allows me to then play that song in any key imaginable, and quickly hand that same chart to another musician, briefly explain what it is, and they will immediately be able to play the song along with me. That's where we start in the course. Moving on from there, we go through what I like to call jam skills, which, as I said, is kind of the 3 L's of bass playing. So the first of those 3 L's is listening. And that seems kind of obvious, obviously, for playing music. We need to be listening, we need ears. But listening is a really, really important concept to think about in a more musical context, especially in a more improvisational context. You need to be listening to what the other musicians are doing around you, and you need to be able to react to it in real time. Intervals, as I just said a moment ago, are hugely important for that, because if you're like truly just in a jam, like a true improvisation, and somebody suddenly starts playing like a new chord progression that they're improvising on the fly, if you have what we call big ears in the business, and you're able to really quickly hear those intervals, the relationship between those chords, you're able to react to that in real time. I like to call it reactive playing. incredibly important. So listening is our first really big skill that we want to work on and think a lot about, and we discussed it much more in depth in the course. The second L is called leading, and it's kind of the other side. Listening, reactive playing, being able to react to other musicians. Leading is kind of the opposite. I call it predictive playing. We call it predictive playing because leading, usually you start thinking about chord tones, and you start thinking about how to get from chord to chord, right? How to lead the band from one place to another. So, in our example a moment ago, playing a song that starts with G chord, then goes to a D, then it goes to an E minor, then it goes to a C. And we just play a simple little bass line, G to D to D, E minor to C, right? If we know that those are the chords, leading involves using what we call passing tones. These are notes taken from our scale. So all that's in the key of G major. So we're going to think about those intervals, those notes within the G major scale. Well, how can we get from a G to an E? Well, we can just walk down one note. Use that F sharp, use that 7th scale degree. How can we get from that E to, say, a C? We can walk through the D. We can use that D as a passing tone or as a leading tone, right? This helps the other musicians and indeed the audience who are all listening to you. So I said it's the other side of the coin from listening. Instead of you listening to and reacting to other people, you're now leading the band from chord to chord. Hugely, critically important thing to know how to do as a bass player. So say, again, our song is G, D, E, C. We could do something like this. G, walk down to D, maybe do a little walk-up melody thing, which outlines the movement to the E, and then walk down to that C, and we could walk all the way down, 4, 3, 2, 1. You guys were listening, even just right there, hearing me play. Your ear is telling you exactly what note needs to come next, right? It's because I'm leading your ear back into that G tonal center. Predictive playing, right? Kind of, not even really predicting what's coming next, but implying what's coming next, leading people's ears into the next chord. Leading. Got listening, we got leading. The third L, I call laying it down, which, is kind of what we do as bass players. But the idea of laying it down for me is all rhythmic. It's not really about the notes as much anymore. It's about rhythmically, what are we playing? Are we just playing big, long, just holding out big, low notes? Or are we doing, are we doing some funkier, more rhythmic kind of a thing? A lot of that gets into another thing that we talk about a lot in the course, which is genre vocabulary, which is really just kind of knowing what kinds of things a classic rock bass player might play versus what a funk bass player might play versus what a country bass player might play, right? But what it really gets into is once you know a little bit about these different styles of music, you kind of have a vocabulary of different groove ideas that you can pull from. So maybe it is just playing big, long whole notes or half notes. Maybe it's listening to the kick drum and the snare drum from the drummer. If your drummer's going boom, ka, boom, boom, ka, boom, ka, boom, boom, ka, you can lock in with that kick and snare rhythm. Or another really classic one that we use in a lot of different styles of music is what we call pedaling, which is just repeating notes quickly. So like pedaling 8th notes. Right? That would be kind of the busiest version of all of those. Or you can have a bass line that's totally doing its own rhythm off in a corner, that's not necessarily reflecting what any other musicians are doing, but is its own thing. Those are all different ways of laying it down. But the most important thing that you want to keep in mind when you're thinking about that is, this idea of laying it down really builds what I call a dynamic arc through a tune, right? So if you envision a band playing together and the levels of energy, right? The levels of intensity, maybe from 1 to 10, you've got 1, which is maybe an intro that's like just piano and singing. It's super, intimate. It's quiet. It's lower energy. If that's 1, you go all the way up to 10. 10 is the guitar player's playing huge power chords, the bass player's rocking out, the drummer's like riding on a crash cymbal, keyboard player's going wild. Like the climax of the tune, the high point, right? We can call that 10. We can do a lot as a bass player to shape the arc of the song dynamically as it moves through those sections. So maybe your intro starts with, a level 2 or 3 in terms of energy, and you're just playing those whole notes. Then it goes into the first verse. Oh, well, now we're at a 4. So maybe now we're playing like half notes or sort of, dotted quarter kind of a thing through that first verse. Well, then we get to the first chorus. Oh, now it's going to step up to a 7. Maybe we start pedaling a little bit, but we aren't doing lots of fills. We aren't using lots of leading tones yet. Well, the second verse drops back down to a 5. Okay. Maybe now we're locked in more with the kick and the snare. And then, you go through the tune, you finally end up in that final chorus, that penultimate climactic moment of the song. And that's where you go up to a 10 with a huge, like, you're walking all over the place, you're playing harder, and you're using all of these other things, right? You're leading in between the chords, you're listening to what the other players are doing to cue those dynamic shifts, right? Maybe you hear the drummer start to build into the next section, you go, oh man, you're listening, you're reacting, right? Reactive playing. All these concepts are stuff that we go over in depth in the course. But I hope you guys are seeing a little bit of how we can break down things that are honestly kind of difficult to understand until you really get granular with them and go, yeah, why is this working the way that it's working?
That's such good stuff, Alex. I mean, I think, those things are so important when you're playing with other people. Sometimes you get thrown in a situation, and if you don't have those skills, you're going to be in trouble, So I think building up those skills, and I think this course does a really great job of sort of setting that up. Let's talk about the course. Let's take a look at a tune in the course, maybe show folks how the course works. Tommy can give us a little run through on some of the tools and stuff, but let's look at one of the examples from the course. How's that sound?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's do the practice session 1, I think, if we can. So this tune is one of the first ones that we learn in the course. And it's a really simple chord progression. Part of what we do in the course is we learn stuff kind of in real time. So you guys in the course will actually watch me truly improvise and jam along with these tracks on my own. I didn't, write anything ahead of time other than creating the backing track. All the bass lines are genuinely off the cuff. So this is it's a simple kind of a rock groove, and the chords are G, F, C, G. So thinking in terms of our intervals, G is our main chord, so that's our 1. F would be our flat 7 chord, so it almost puts it in kind of a G dominant sound. And then C is our 4 chord. So it's a 1, flat 7, 4, 1. And you guys will see as we go through the tune, I start with whole notes, then I start locking in with the kick and snare, and then I start pedaling eighths towards the end of playing the exercise. And you guys will hear nothing else in the tune is changing. It's just drums, guitars, grooving along. But you guys will hear as I move through those different rhythmic ideas, it really affects the energy level of each section of the tune and makes them feel distinct. So yeah.
Nice.
Also, you'll see all the amazing features that we've got on the TrueFire player. We've got sound slice, all this cool stuff, but Tommy will tell you all about that.
Yeah, I'll give you guys a little show. Let's roll that track.
Nice and open. Listen to the kick drum pattern. Here we go with the kick drum pattern. pedaling.
There you go. So sort of seeing the culmination of the three L's happening there, which is great. And yeah, this is just one of those groove and feel segments, Alex, from the course, from that section, which is about, kind of those three L's and how to get to that point where you're adding the groove and feel. You can really see it come together there. For those of you that are not familiar, this is the TrueFire player and the interface. So just give you a quick tour because the tools are really cool because especially for something like this. So you look at a performance like Alex has here, this tab sync allows you to take any one of those sections and make a loop out of it to work on that for as long as you need to. You could slow things down, you could speed things up. And you can even get to, a fretboard view, which is nice to be able to see what's happening on the neck. And wow, this stuff, in this section is pretty straightforward, Alex. Like as we get deeper into the course, we'll show everybody a little bit more of what's going on later on down the line. But yeah, I mean, you get into some of these like really deeper stylistic studies, and you go through the whole process of listening to the track, charting it down, and then applying all the things that you're learning in a different musical context, which I think is really killer, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's, I was going to say for anyone out there who is maybe either already has the course or is looking at the course, it will also segue really well into a lot of the other content that I have on TrueFire because I've got a course up, for instance, called I think it's Country Through the Ages is the name of it. So like I do a lesson in here on country. I talk a little bit about country genre vocabulary and we play a country tune. But if you're like a country guy and you go through Bass Jam Survival Guide first, that my country course would be a great place to move along to from there because it'll go really deep into all these different eras of country music. And then you'll have so much more context, musically speaking, for, you'll learn the specific country specific stuff in that course, but you'll have a much broader understanding of, again, all this intervals and these different ways of interacting with musicians and crafting bass lines and all this stuff. I think they'll hopefully tie together in a very copacetic way for everybody. So.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Jeff, I think we have an interesting question coming in on the chat.
Absolutely. Let's do a little questions here. We're going to give you some questions here, Alex. There's a good one. What do you do with a guitar player who gets up and plays everything he knows all over the place? Now, I've never even heard of such a thing. I can't imagine a guitar player doing that. So I don't know who Brad is talking about, but let's say that was a situation. But on a serious note, as the bass player, how do you deal with somebody who's kind of all over the place? Is it even more important for you to sort of hold down that, lay it down, hold down that foundation at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I think, that is a great question. And yeah, no guitar player ever. No, it's funny. The more mature musicians you work with, the less that happens. But we won't go in that direction. I think that from a bass player's perspective, it is our job first and foremost to support the band as best as we can. And so if you've got a guitar player who's really going wild and going a bit all over the place, you kind of you've got a few decisions to make. Number one, you can just keep it really simple and, try to do what you can. It can be a little bit like herding cats sometimes. We all know that classic phrase. Bass playing can feel like that. And so you can kind of make the choice to either control the situation and really use a lot of these techniques that I'm talking about, keeping track of the song form, using really clear, kind of leading playing, that more predictive playing, lean away from improvising and kind of leaning into the craziness and just say, yeah, no, I hear you going wild. We're still on a D chord, and I'm going to remind you with my bass playing that we are still on a D chord. That's one way to handle it. Or depending on the situation, it may be appropriate to lean into the wildness. And that's where you flip from the leading side of things into the listening side of things. And you can try to match that intensity, go out on whatever limbs your buddy is going out on, and try to challenge yourself to listen and hear what he's doing. I mean, from the tone of your question, I think it's maybe a little implied that it is more of it's not necessarily a welcome experience having this guitar player kind of go a little crazy. But we can do a lot to make make the best of situations, I would say. I've definitely been in musical environments before where somebody was overplaying a little bit or something like that. It's like, well, yeah, I can get annoyed by it. I can try to use my bass playing to corral them back in or something and fight the current. But it's equally fun to go, all right, you overplay. I'm gonna go right there with you. Let's do some crazy, wild, prog, psychedelic, all over the place thing, and let's do it together and try to turn it into something fun. Yeah. So that would be, kind of. I see two paths there, and it's really it would really be up to you which one you want to go down.
Certainly. Depends upon what band you're in. Who's the leader of the band, right?
Exactly.
Follow the band leader.
And what you're trying to do, because that's that speaks more to are you going for an improvisational approach and you're really just jamming, or are you you're doing a cover gig or something and or a cover jam and you're trying to play songs and somebody's stepping into a great. So Neil, you're playing Harvest Moon or something, and suddenly this guy's over here with his whammy bar, that's obviously a little less appropriate. But yeah, that would be my advice.
Absolutely, that's good stuff. So here's a good question as well. So if you had a simple chord progression, especially as a gigging musician, a player who may have to play in different styles, different things, all in one gig. How do you approach that if you say you have a song, simple chord progression, but it needs to be more of a funk tune versus you have that song and it needs to be more of a country tune? How do you approach that on the instrument? Do you go all in with that? Do you sort of hint at the very identifiable things that would put it in one of those genres or the other? Or how are you thinking about that?
Sure. Yeah, that is a great question. I mean, it all ends up being kind of it's a spectrum, right? And that I love that particular example of funk versus country, because on the surface you go, oh man, I couldn't imagine two more different styles of music. And then you remember a lot of the old Waylon and Willie stuff, a lot of guys from the 70s, Crisco, country disco. Sounds silly and sounds absurd. Some of the best tunes ever from that era of countries, the kind of alt country 70s stuff, particularly Waylon and Willie. Those records are really well known for the Crisco feel. It is literally country, picking guitar and bass, and then the drummer's literally playing a disco groove, and it's a full-on country thing. So it's it is a spectrum. I think a lot of it comes from experience, and a lot of it comes from who you are as a player. Do you lean, I as a player tend to lean into a lot of ghost notes. So ghost notes being little dead strikes and stuff. So if I were going to play a funkier bass line, a lot of other bass players might go right? I'm going to do something you hear all those extra taps and those little dead notes in there. That's what I do stylistically. So on a country gig, I might, a normal country bass player might go, I'll come in and I'll take it in more of a rockabilly direction, where I'm adding some more of those ghost notes, adding a little bit more rhythmic complexity. Now, I'm doing that because that's kind of who I am. That's the kind of stuff I like. That's how I like to play. But I think number one, it comes from experience. It comes from having a really strong understanding of this idea of genre vocabulary, listening to a lot of, if it is country, a lot of country records. If it's funk, a lot of funk records, a lot of great funk bass players, James Jamerson and, guys like that, Bootsy Collins. but the more you sort of listen and the more you get out and jam and the more you develop as a player, you will find your path through all that kind of stuff. And find like what are the techniques and what are the kinds of sounds and approaches that make your playing, no matter what genre it is, and then tempering that against what's appropriate.
Awesome. When you're playing, another question, when you're playing, what are you really listening for? If you get up to jam with a band, you're going to play a song, maybe you know the song, maybe you sort of know the song. What's your real focus? A lot of guys listen to slightly different things. It's easy to say, well, I just listen to the drums, but what are you really cueing in on when you are trying to, find your spot in the band?
Sure. Fantastic question. So, number one thing is I'm listening for the drums because I want to know what, the drums are going to dictate the feel and the tempo of the tune. So how much are we swinging? Like, how straight are we playing? How much are we swinging? Where's the tempo at? Are we like pushing? Are we playing a little bit on top of the beat and really bringing energy? Are we laying way back? A lot of that information is going to come from the drummer. And then, of course, listening to the kick and snare patterns, trying to suss out how notey the drummer is. I love playing with drummers who play lots of notes because it gives you a lot of good rhythmic texture to dive into with those kick and snare patterns and really lock in with. But beyond the drummer, it's, foundational for a bass player. I'm listening to everybody. And the things that I'm listening for are, a good handful of things. Number one, not just what the chord changes are, but what, how dense are the chords that we're playing. So, for example, I have a piano here that I can play for you guys for a second. If we're playing a C minor, are we just truly playing a C minor? Or are we playing some cool, big, fancy, jazzy R&B kind of, which that chord is like a C minor, could be a C minor 11, technically. Where are we in that territory? Are they lusher, more complex chords, or are they not? After that, I'm listening to. I always try to kind of profile the players that I'm playing with. Is this a guitar player who is a fan of doing really small little? It can't really do much of it on bass, but like something like that, little 2 and 3 note dyads and triads stuff up high on the neck. That a lot of guitar players, even if they're playing rhythm, will play that way. I hear that and I say, great, I've got some room to move more on my instrument. If I've got a guitar player who's just playing big power chords down low, I know that I need to stick even lower. Who's taking charge with fills and transitions? Because if the singer is singing a lyric and then I hear every time the keyboard player is going, playing little fills and little turnarounds every single time, I go, okay, you're a fills guy. I'm going to stay out of your way. Or if nobody's stepping up and taking fills and I'm playing my bass line and it comes to the end of a phrase, I'm more likely to do little fills of my own if I know that there's going to be space for them. So yeah, that's a good handful of the things that I'm usually thinking in the moment. But that's back to that first L. It's all about having big ears. It's all about listening. It's 100% of it. And it's a very much a trained skill that you have to practice outside of even just playing your instrument to be able to listen to other musicians while playing and kind of connect those two things in your brain. Where on the one hand, it's like you're hearing information and you're processing it and then translating that into muscle movement is something that does take a lot of practice. So I encourage you guys to go out and jam and play with other musicians as often as you possibly can, because it builds so much musical connective tissue in your playing. So yeah.
Good stuff. Very good. Yeah. Very good advice there for I think anybody to to be paying attention to. Let's talk a little bit about another tune in the course. We talked about we played through one. Let's bring up another track, and then if anybody has any other questions, drop them in the chat there. But let's talk about another tune. I think we were going to maybe talk about another option. So Tommy, you want to play another track here, or do we want to have Alex play along with it? Either way.
Yeah, I mean, we could do that. Alex was gonna, I think, teach another one of these, kind of run down the way that you would approach another track, like at one of the other grooves.
Yeah, so the one that I had pulled up on my end to play is it's a similar groove to the one we watched the performance of a few minutes ago, but this one just has a slightly different chord progression. With this one, I can talk and do a little bit more in real time of the more kind of
Sure.
fill type playing, if you will, leaning more into the leading side of those three L's.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what.
Word salad.
Do you want to teach a little bit, and
Sure.
then we'll come back and play a little bit of it here?
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's do that.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so yeah, this will be practice section 2 in the groove and feel thing. But so it's actually the same drum groove. It's the same tempo, just the chords are different. And it's still in the key of G. But this G, we've got it actually starts on an E minor. And it's a bar of E minor, then a bar of C, then a bar of G, and then a bar of D major. Now, looking at this in terms of the intervals, there's really 2 different ways to look at it. And this is kind of a fun thing to think about. On the one hand, it starts on the E minor, and that's really where like the meat of what we're doing is at. So if we call that the 1, and now we're going to the C, that would put it in an E minor scale. So when we talked about our minor intervals, we go 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 1, right? That C would be our flat 6. So 1, flat 6, flat 3, and then our 5 is how we would look at those intervals. However, there's a second way of looking at it, which is if we go from the key of G, we're actually starting on the 6, if we're looking at it from the perspective of the key of G. So in that case, we would say that it starts on our 6, then it goes to our 4, then it goes to our 1, our G chord, right, halfway through the progression, and then it goes to our 5. So it's kind of up to you which one of those 2 ways is easier for you to think about it. I would write it as 1, flat 6, 1, flat 6, flat 3, flat 7. It's more numbers and more flats, but I'm thinking in terms of, I'm in E minor for this song. But if you wrote it as 6, 4, 1, 5, and you thought about it in terms of G, because G and E minor are basically, they are the same scale. It's just depending on where you're starting and ending the note sequence. So anyways, just kind of a fun little aside for you guys to think about. These intervals are a really deep concept that you can think about in a lot of different ways. But let's go ahead and listen to the track. I've got it pulled up on my end, so I can actually just play along with it live for you guys. And you guys will see, I'm going to do a similar thing where I start really mellow in what I'm playing, and then by the end, I'm going to do this building of this dynamic arc and lean into different things. You'll also hear me use some leading tones as I move from chord to chord. So let's go ahead and play along with the track, and you guys can watch a little bit of what I do. Oh, hang on, let me make sure I've got this pulled up correctly on my end here. Okay. 1, 2, E minor. Nice and simple. So yeah, you guys saw I started really open and simple. And then as the tune went on, I added more and more, and hopefully you guys felt it really does change the feel of each of those sections. It really, we have a lot of control as a bass player, based, how kind of dense our playing is, you could think of it. How many notes we're playing in a bar, how busy we're playing. We have a lot of control over that sense of dynamic art, how open the tune feels versus how high energy the tune feels, just by simply changing the way that we're laying it down. What rhythmic elements we're paying attention to, how often we're using those like passing tones and passing phrases and stuff is all incredibly powerful when it comes to the tools that we have at our disposal, musically speaking. So
awesome. Very cool. Yes, it is. And it sounds great, man. Sounds awesome when you're playing that stuff in there. Really hear you sort of sticking in the pocket there.
Yeah.
So another question just rolled in from Ron. Actually, kind of a good question. I'm a 73-year-old medium player, trouble with arthritis, I believe he's saying, loves to play the bass. What's thoughts on that? And I think that's a good question in general for anyone who struggles a little bit with being able to play. How can they pull off doing some of this stuff? And what would you suggest?
Absolutely, yeah. So I feel for you, first of all, and I know from personal experience how frustrating it can be to have physical issues that make it harder for you to play. Fortunately, there are a lot of different things that you can do. So the first thing I would kind of think about and take a look at is your equipment. So if the bass is notoriously a pretty humongous instrument. Most basses are a 34-inch or even 35 or 36-inch scale, which is a full 10 inches longer than most guitars. So the first option would be to get what we call a short scale bass, which are getting more and more common these days. And they actually are usually a 29 or a 30-inch scale. So they're much shorter. The nut lands at about your fourth or fifth fret from your quote unquote full size bass. So it means that your frets are a little bit closer together. That's the first great thing that can really help with a condition like arthritis. But the other thing is that because the scale is shorter, the strings are under less tension. So they're actually easier to press down with your fretting hand, and they're easier to pluck, right? That would be my first advice, is maybe look into a short scale instrument. Another really great thing that you can think about, and this is more just getting into technique stuff, you can, my dad used to tell me when I very first started gigging, my dad would drill into my head, let your amp do the work. And I've realized that is something that is so critically important, not just when it comes to, tone and stage volume and all that kind of stuff, just physically speaking. If I turn my instrument up, I can play very lightly and still get great volume and a lot of tone. I tend to dig in more. So I take that into account. But like even just something as simple as just focusing on maybe getting a little bit more volume out of whatever amplification system you're using, that'll take some of the stress off of those fingers and make it so that you can play very softly and very relaxed, but still get a good full tone, still feel like you're keeping up with the band. Don't be afraid to turn it up to 11, as they say. You can also, there's a million different ways to play bass. I always kind of teach I call it the walking man, the very typical, that kind of approach. If you guys can see my right hand, there is nothing in the world that says that you can't use your thumb. Lots of great bass players simply play with their thumb. You could even find a system where you're not even engaging any of your muscles at all. And you could literally play, I've seen guys play like this. And their hand is completely rigid. And all of their playing is coming from larger muscle groups further up the arm. The wrist is straight, their fingers are totally straight. You can absolutely get away with doing that. I know there's a lot of bass players who use almost more of like a banjo-esque technique or a classical guitar technique. You can use other fingers in your right hand. I have a friend who plays exclusively with his ring and his middle on his right hand. In terms of like fretting stuff with your left hand, there is no reason you can't grab one of these bad guys, capo, and use it on bass. If that makes it a little bit easier to keep things in a higher position on the neck, or help you if you want to use more open strings, for instance, you can even half capo stuff. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it. And then, of course, using a pick. For many years, I swore I would never use a pick. I use a pick all the time now, because it's just a different set of muscles in your hand. And so, something like that might trigger your particular brand of arthritis a little bit less than trying to, have a lot of mobility in those right hand fingers. So just kind of a handful of ideas for you to think about. Hopefully something in there will help a little bit, because we should all be able to make music no matter what's going on with our bodies. At least that's
absolutely, man. Those are great tips. Really good stuff, Alex. And I totally agree. The music is a great healer and
absolutely
mentally for a person. So you want to be able to play and figure out whatever it takes to make that happen. So I know we're kind of winding down here. We're about to wrap this thing up. But for everyone, thank you so much. We're going to talk I want to talk a little bit about some of these stylized jams. One of the cool things in this course, and once again, Alex has, I think, 19 different courses available on TrueFire, lots of different jam play courses. He did a ton of the jam tracks for jam play and for us. And just a ton of great stuff. But in this course, I really think you pretty much hit it out of the park, because you go over these really essential things, but then you also do this stylized section where you have a classic rock, modern rock, blues, funk, country, modern worship, R&B. You just cover a lot of different styles in there. And I think that's a really great help for anyone who plays bass, including, I had someone ask me about a good course for a guitar player who wanted to just be more knowledgeable about what's happening with bass. I think this is a great course for that as well, because you really do a good job of sort of explaining what those really core things are that are happening in these different stylized, video or stylized lessons, basically. So let's take a look at one of those. Let's dig into, let's give it a listen, and kind of hear the difference between what we've been doing and maybe something a little bit different.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and thank you again for all of the kind words. I appreciate it. And that was really the idea. I wanted this to be not even like a comprehensive, like, here's how you do it all, but it's like, here's the foundational concepts. Let's tickle some different genres. And then for whoever that player is, you can take all this knowledge and then dive deep into that genre, learn all the genre vocabulary, and it's just going to make so much more sense. Yeah. And you're going to be able to use, if you're off learning a bunch of hard rock bass lines, like let's say you're a Rush fan, just, randomly, and you go off, if you take this course first, you're going to be able to listen and even learn a bunch of Geddy Lee's bass lines, and you'll understand, wait a second, that he's using leading tones. Oh, he's listening to Neil Peart's groove and locking in with the bass and drums. Oh, he, in this second chorus of this tune, he's suddenly playing twice as many notes. There's that dynamic art. You'll have so much more context, hopefully, if I've done my job well. You'll have so much more context for all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I'd say I feel like, I don't know, you guys pick one. I don't know.
We want to do the modern rock?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, the modern rock one is super cool. It's like a Foo Fighter-y thing.
It's so cool, because what each one of these two are like a little kind of microcosm of what you do in the course. The whole first section of the course is kind of the fundamentals and what you at least need to have to kind of get into the world of jamming and improvising on bass. Second section, you go over the 3 L's, which is great. And then in each of these jam studies, you go through listening down, charting out the groove, figuring out what the chord changes are, and the number system you talked about. You do the performance, and you talk about those essential, kind of stylistic approaches. So let's take a quick listen to the modern rock performance, and then we can talk about some of those things that you did.
Totally.
Here we go.
All right, 1, 2, 3.
very cool, man.
Yeah, great stuff, man. I think that the cool thing that really shows, as you do in all of the lessons in this course, is you can take something that's a pretty straightforward, simple progression, right? Not a lot of crazy things happening in the chord progression, but it never felt like, oh, this is just the same thing from the bass perspective, you know?
Dynamics, right? Yeah.
Just adding stuff, which was nice, you know, just little variations kept it interesting.
Yeah, thanks. No, yeah, it's cool. I had a lot of fun putting that tune together. And honestly, I noticed I make a mistake in there, and wanted it left in specifically because A, we all make mistakes. It's important to know that. But B, the way that we did this course, all the tunes are genuinely me improvising. So like I made the backing tracks months before we actually did the shoot. And I intentionally was like, I'm not going to listen to them. I'm not going to chart them out. I want to have forgotten completely what I did, which I did for the most part. And then, yeah, you know, in the moment in filming, we were like, cool, we're going to roll these back. And I had two listen throughs of the tune to chart it and then just dive in and start playing. And so it's like, especially in a jam environment, you know, you're never going to absolutely nail it. And that's true of even, you know, I've been on stage in front of 10,000 people and been playing something new and, you know, totally biffed something, and that's okay. But that was really important to me to have in there as an element of like, no, I want you guys to watch me do this for real.
Right.
In stuff that I either like never heard before or haven't heard in a very long time and genuinely don't know. And so they're all very like real, authentic, genuine performances from that perspective.
That's very cool.
Totally.
Yeah. So
awesome, man. Well, I think it's a great course. Once again, all of your stuff is amazing. But this is a really good course. So everybody check it out. Go to the links below the video there. This video will be up so you can watch again and pick up a few more of the nuggets there that Alex was taking. Man, it's really good stuff. Really, thank you for doing this. Thank you for doing this live stream. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, guys.
And you know, we'll do some more of these. We're doing a lot more live things coming up. So thanks everybody tuning in. And check our live page for all the live cool stuff we've got coming up there at TrueFire. Yeah. Alex, anything else? You can find Alex on Twitch. He's like a Twitch streaming machine. You know, so if you got anything else you got going on, tell us what you got going on.
Yeah, no, that's twitch.tv twitch.tv/A Nathan Scott, which is my kind of composer name that I use. If anybody is interested in production and specifically game scoring, that is actually most of the work I'm doing these days, is writing the music for indie video games. So you can come watch me on Twitch. You can also check out my website, anathanscott.com. You can find my portfolio of all kinds of fun stuff I've done in the past, as well as, you know, again, links to Twitch and a bunch of my social stuff. So yeah, you know, come and say hi. The Twitch stream is a really good time. If you guys have ever wanted to watch somebody make a bunch of weird noises and write music for video games, you know, it might be something for you to come check out. We like to have fun over there. So
nice.
Sounds killer.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you for myself, Tommy, and Shane, and the rest of the TrueFire crew. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Alex. It's been great.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
We'll see you soon, man.